I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. When we first recognise our child is neurodivergent, it can feel like the ground shifts. But it's not just about learning new strategies, it's about reshaping our expectations and sometimes letting go of old dreams or habits that just don't work for our family anymore. If you've been on this journey for a while, you know it's not all about fixing your child. It's about finding a way to live together that works for everyone. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. This one with a bit of a personal or reflective twist rather than focused on information. I'm talking today about changes I've made after recognizing my child was neurodivergent. I talk about a lot in my Chaos to Calm program that I think understanding our child is what gives us empathy that can then lead to patience and that real shift in how we do our parenting. And so I want to talk a little bit today about that process for me, the understanding, the empathy, and then the shift. I've talked a little bit before about some of the neurodivergence in my family, and I try to be vague to, respect my children's privacy and that kind of thing. But so I'm going to not necessarily be specific here, but talk about a couple of the changes that we've made. And it's particularly around three things. One is dinner time. 2 is physical affection. And then the third one is giving instructions. And so I don't think that the diagnosis is really important here because all kids are different, but particularly with neurodivergent kids, they're particularly autism are a very heterogeneous group is the fancy word, which means a group made out of people who are not all similar. There's a lot of difference in the group that we'd refer to as autistic people. And so ADHD and learning challenges and even anxiety can be similar. With anxiety, some kids really get that flight response where they want to avoid anxious things. Some get the fight response where they will take you on. So it doesn't really matter the diagnosis. What it means, what's more important to focus on is the need, how we understand the need and then respond with patience and with empathy. So let me dive into the first one, dinner time. I call this, change number 1, letting go of the sit down dinner. In my mind and in my family, when I grew up, dinner looked like everybody sitting down together around the table. The same was true for my husband's family as well. It was a time when everyone would connect around the mealtime. And so for us, that's what the expectation was like. We automatically followed that. And when we had our first child, and we would wait and have dinner as a family together, it looked, in my mind, it looked like a quiet time. Everyone was seated and having calm and quiet conversation. Fast forward the clock a few years, and this is what it was really like. There's noise, there's movement, there are balls being thrown sometimes. And that brought for me a lot of physical discomfort and sensory discomfort as well. I get overwhelmed at noise, really don't like having to have conversations with people who, when people are spread all around the house, there's lots of raised voices and yelling. I really don't like that. And so for me, there were two things going on. The first one was that this was not at all the dinner time I had expected. This, and that for me meant I felt like I was not being successful as a parent because I wasn't replicating that quiet sit-down dinner that I imagined in my mind. The second thing for me is the overwhelm that came with the noise and the movement and the, physical activity and that kind of thing. And so the shift for me came when I was doing some learning about my child and the neurodivergence, and also learning about kids who have that need to move. And one of the books I was reading, I think for the podcast even at the time, was the one by Russell Barkley about raising a child with ADHD. And really what happened for me was the insight that came with understanding that for my child, there were needs associated with not being able to sit at the table, standing up, perhaps moving around in a room or nearby to the dinner table, but not sitting there. And so that shifted my perspective from this kid just isn't doing what I'm asking, or this kid isn't following the rules, this kid's being defiant, to this kid is having difficulty meeting those expectations. And it was a combination of things like just not having, finding it really hard to sit still, particularly after a school day where lots of sitting still was required. And then what I realized was that for me, I could see dinner time in a different way, and I could see it about shared moments and connections, even if it looked different. So it didn't have to be about everybody sitting down quietly. It could be about how can we let everybody meet their own physical needs in terms of movement and all of that stuff, and still have those shared moments. So that's the mindset shift. The practical tips I would give is to offer an alternative for regulation. So maybe it's about a stress ball instead of a bouncy ball near the table that meets my kids' needs as well as my own needs. Sometimes it might be about accepting that if a person's not sitting at the table but they're nearby, that is okay, and that can still be part of the conversation. We can have most of the family sitting down and one person pacing around and still have family connection and conversation. And I think also too, so trying to keep that value in mind, regardless of the behavior or how it's being expressed, is the main thing. So those moments together before dispersing is what I held on to there. I've got to say, actually, that nothing really has changed about dinner time except for my expectations, I think. So I haven't, my kids still doing things exactly the way all three of them do it, which is different. But what's changed is my expectation about what's okay and what's not okay. But that has led to me feeling a lot more calm at dinner time, and my child feeling calm as well. There are no longer moments where I'm getting frustrated, which is raising tensions for everybody. So I think this is a really great example about how if we change our perspective, sometimes that's all that is required to take all of the heat and disagreement out of certain situations. So that's change number one, letting go of the sit-down dinner. Change number two is rethinking physical affection. I have, and this is something that's probably not new to a lot of people. For some people it might be, but I think growing up, there was, in my generation, it was often the expectation that you would do what parents asked, which might be to give someone a hug. You were expected to do it regardless of whether you wanted to or not. And I think it's really important that we're making a shift away from that as a generation of parents. But, there are still things that can be a love language for us. And for me, in particular, it's physical affection. And so for me, I love hugs. I like, having them often, and they give me a sense of comfort and connection with my kids. And some of my kids like it, some don't like it. So for me, there's a little bit of sadness about that, the loss of that physical affection when um, my kids pull away or they don't want that. And again, it highlights, just like the dinner time example did, that sometimes it's about my need as a parent and what I want, and how sometimes we have to put that aside if it doesn't match up with our kids and what they need. And so I worked my way through that sadness and sometimes a little bit of frustration as well, in terms of why can't you just do it? Which I know probably all of us with defiant kids think sometimes. And then I had to move my way through finding, again, what is the value underlying there. And my values are about connection, which I'm wanting to show through hugs, but it's also about respecting my child's needs and having them really feel respected and understood. And because I do believe that's what leads to a lasting relationship with our kids. So I faced this moment where I could either push on with how I wanted things to be and essentially be pushing my child away by causing all of these little discomforts daily because I wasn't responding to what they wanted, or I could change my expectations, meet my needs in different ways, and find a new way to connect with my child and children. So that's what I did. Connection doesn't have to be physical to be meaningful. It's about finding a way to connect with your child that feels safe for them, more importantly, and meets your needs as well. So connection now, rather than physical affection, for me looks like chatting and side by side, sitting next to my child and connecting, particularly about shared interests. It's by sharing things together, funny videos that I've seen on the internet, playing games that I don't particularly like to play, like poker, solitaire, that kind of thing. But by being a lot more respectful of how my child likes to show affection, it's opened up ways to connect physically as well. So there are a lot of high fives and daps now rather than hugs. But I have found that too, with time, my child started initiating some of that physical affection as well. And when that happens, I have to play it very cool, like I did not even notice. And then I go and say to my husband later, oh my gosh, I got a hug, I got this. And I feel like such a fool. But I do think it's very, it means so much to me. But I know that if I make a big deal out of it, it would be too overwhelming or confronting for my child. So, yeah. My practical tips would be to think about your child's favorite ways to connect, and see that as a bit of a menu for you to choose from. There are lots of different ways to connect, and celebrate those small wins. When your child does show physical contact or seek it, I guess the main thing is treating it like a real gift and an expression of love rather than an obligation on their part. So, yeah, if you are hug starved, find someone else to to give you hugs, and try and make sure you don't expect it from people who don't want to give it. And then my third change is thinking about giving instructions, and to try that I found it successful to move away from demands and kind of towards invitations. And the story here is that, I was asking my kid to do something one day, and then he said, "Well, I was going to do it, but I don't want to now." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, once someone asks you to do something, you naturally don't want to do it. Everybody's like that, right?" And I said, "No, not everybody is like that." It was a revelation to him. He was like, "Oh, really?" Because that's just his natural way. Um, and so I think that's really important to consider, especially when we talk about lots of kids who have demand avoidance, and think of how many instructions they're given throughout the day, at home, getting ready in the morning, going to school, and then in the afternoon. And so I really do believe that kids do well when they can, like Ross Green talks about a lot, and there are ways that we can encourage our kids to do positive things. I think sometimes that direct giving of instructions and expecting compliance, that I used to do, and that probably was pretty effective when the kids were little, had to change a little bit. It was creating some tension, especially when kids are dysregulated. And so that's not just emotionally upset. That could be tired after school. That could be feeling like they've got too many demands or stresses. And so the shift I made was from asking for help to framing things as a bit of a choice. And I think I noticed, I mean, I knew this in my head and from my work and knowledge about kids and their development that it would work, but it surprised me how much there was an increase in cooperation. So I think when we take the pressure off, we really invite collaboration instead of resistance. Yeah. So practical tips are some things like, just thinking about how you phrase things, and if you want to listen through, there are some things on declarative language in my podcast that you can have a listen to. But it's phrases like, "Oh, could you help me with," and then say what it is. It might not be asking for a particular thing. It might be, for example, if I'm cooking dinner and making the school lunches and the dog needs to be fed, I might say, I'm doing dinner and the lunches and the dog needs dinner. Could you help me out with something? Or could you help me with that? Maybe then, my kids get to choose what they want to do, the least objectionable task. Or which would you rather do first? It's giving choice and control, and maybe just having a conversation about it rather than asking, "Can you do this, please?" Also, building in flexibility, I think, as well. So being willing to accept a different way of completing the task. I look at the lunch boxes sometimes when my kids have made the lunch and I think, oh my goodness, like it is so different to how I would do it. Morning tea is just 20 jats and that's it. Like, literally, I counted them. But, they've done it. They've helped. And it is adequate. It's good enough. They'll learn from their experience. If they don't like it, they'll do it differently next time. But I think it's really, if you can move away from the idea of control about the task and demands, the idea of invitations and flexibility about how it's done really does take the pressure off, and reduce that amount of resistance that you might experience. And so for me, what this has resulted in is just last night when I came home from picking up someone from their activity and my husband was away for work, one of this particular child that I've had to adapt things for said, "Oh, do you want me to make dinner?" And I hadn't asked or anything. And I think it's the freedom from lots of obligations and just the knowledge that they have now that it's going to be helpful to offer when they just see how much I'm doing, I thought was just so lovely. And a genuine offer. And so, yeah, if you can try and make some ways to stop it from being like a boss asking a subordinate what to do, and ways of collaborating or working together and inviting some help and assistance, it can really, really change the dynamic. So I wanted to talk about, I guess to summarize, I wonder if you can see how each of these three examples highlight how the changes have really just been about me, about what I expect for dinner, what I expect in terms of affection, and how I phrase demands and instructions. And so I want you to think about one expectation that you might be able to release or let go of today. Maybe it's something that's not even coming from you. Maybe it's just coming from society and the way that those expectations just creep in subconsciously to us. What's something that you could let go of, or even just adjust? And I want to encourage you that letting go doesn't mean giving up. It's just making space for a better fit for your family. We don't have to do things a certain way. We can adapt to do things in a flexible way that suits everybody. So in letting go of the idea of having firm expectations, it doesn't mean we're not encouraging growth. It's one of the best things we can give our kids, is the chance to be themselves. So this one is just for us as parents to think about what we can change in terms of our expectations. And I'd love to hear from you what you might change, and then whether that's had a positive effect for your child, or maybe flow on to the whole family. I'd really love to hear. So get in touch if you have a go at these things. I'd love to hear about it. And I will catch up with you next time on another episode. Thanks for joining me again. It's my greatest privilege to be able to share this information with you, parents who are genuinely interested in just doing this job so consciously so that your kids can benefit. I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.